5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's time to count down the top 5. Brought to you by SaveWithConrad.com.
Well, let's start right at number 5, Tony, on your list. And I have to admit, hell of a match, but I didn't see this on your list. Sasha Banks versus Bayley from NXT TakeOver in Brooklyn in 2015. Tony, you weren't even watching wrestling in 2015. This match had to make quite an impression on you.
Well, we watched it here on What Happened When. And I remember watching it, first of all, thinking how great it was. And I remember thinking, and even I think it's been said before, that this match was the one that elevated women's wrestling. So why not be in one of the top 5? Being a match that absolutely would elevate women's wrestling to what it is today. It took women's wrestling from TNA, so to speak, into just great wrestling action. Look at the fans' reaction on that still shot. I think that's very, very easily the number 5 because it was a phenomenal match. Phenomenal match or matches you don't expect to get the fans into, and these two ladies did. That's number 5.
Can't say I would have predicted it, but I guess we could expect your number 4 on Tony Schiavone's top 5 biggest wrestling moments.
Mm-hmm.
Number 4 for Tony is Crockett buying the TBS time slot in 1985. Now, as a reminder, this is a slot that they had enjoyed, and then in the middle of the night, Vince McMahon made a deal that didn't make Ole Anderson too terribly happy.
Mm-mm.
But just in time for WrestleMania, Vince decides to unload it, sells it back to Crockett. Mr. Crockett, David Crockett, has actually explained that he and his brother went down to the bank and got a loan to give Vince the money to fund the original WrestleMania. What a story. It comes in at number 4 on your list, Tony.
Well, in my personal list, it's one of the top because it certainly did change my career. But I think there's no question about the impact that it had on pro wrestling at the time, because once Jimmy bought it, and once the stars of the NWA started to get national exposure again, it made. I think, am I wrong to say it made Ric Flair a household name?
I think it made you a household name, Tony.
Well, it could have, but I think it made guys like Ric Flair and Barry Windham and Lex
Dusty
Luger,
Rhodes,
Dusty Rhodes, all those household names. They were big stars anyway, but on a national basis, that's why I put it at number 4.
Now, we know that Vince did not actually buy Georgia Championship Wrestling. I think people gloss over that.
Right.
Because we know that the way Vince is able to get the TBS time slot or in the first place is because he's got a deal to buy Georgia Championship Wrestling. So therefore, since Georgia has a contract to air their programming, if he owns Georgia, now he can run whatever he wants, and he ran recorded matches from the WWF. And he's going to continue to own Georgia Championship Wrestling, at least on paper, for a couple more years. Are you of the impression that there was a settlement made? Because I think TBS had actually filed a lawsuit against Vince McMahon alleging breach of contract, because that was not the type of wrestling that Ted thought he was putting on. And he was not happy with the ratings, and he tried to undermine that deal as much as he can, giving different day parts to different wrestling promotions, Ole included amongst them. But do you think that was some sort of a TBS settlement? Like maybe Vince told Turner, hey, I'm going to sell it back to Crockett, and then they were cool with it? I mean, I guess I'm trying to drive at, do you think the Crockett's actually had to pay Vince that $1 million or whatever it was to get this time slot back, or could they have negotiated it differently?
Wow, that's a question I really can't answer. I just think that I think they had to pay the money. I don't know.
Well, Bill Watts has claimed that before this deal was actually made, that Ted Turner had agreed to finance a national expansion of Mid-South Wrestling, because Ted had started to air some of Bill shows on TBS as well. Not this
Right.
original time slot, but another day, another time.
Right.
And I guess the idea was Bill had first approached Ted about that, and Ted had agreed to fund some of it, and he would get a split on the new expansion towns.
Hmm.
And according to Bill, if Crockett and Vince hadn't made their deal, Watts could have landed on TBS. What would that have changed for Jim Crockett Promotions, for Bill Watts, for Ric Flair, for Tony Schiavone, if Watts winds up with this station and not JCP?
Well, I know what it would change for me, but what would it have changed for Jim Crockett Promotions? Maybe Jimmy would have gone out of business a lot sooner than he did. By the time by the time I guess WrestleMania III came around, the territories were kind of dropping, weren't they? Right and left, and Crockett would have been just another territory. Then he decided to do battle with Vince and started to go national, and it didn't really work out financially for him. And I know you've had an interview. You had an interview with Jimmy before he passed, and you've talked to David extensively.
Oh, yeah.
When the Crockett's had to sell to Turner, I don't know if it was a case of trying to expand too quickly or just not a great business plan. I don't know who's to blame for that. But I do know that had Jimmy not bought TBS, we wouldn't have had, for Ric Flair and for everybody in the NWA, the great years that we had from what, 85, 86, 87, those great years.
Yeah, let me ask you about that. Like, hypothetically, we know what a tear Crockett was on when they get this opportunity in 85. The Rock and Rolls had just come over. They win their belts in the very first match. But what if, because again, this is early March 85, just weeks before WrestleMania, the very first one. What if Crockett had this opportunity to control the time slot in 84? If they would have done it in March of 84 and not March of 85, they would have been just a few months removed from Starrcade. They would have had kind of a year jump on Vince McMahon's national expansion. Not exactly, but you get where I'm going. Like,
Yeah.
Hogan wins the title in late January of 84, beating the Sheik in Madison Square Garden. Imagine if 2 months later, that's when JCP secures that time slot. Man, I don't know. What could have been, right?
Yeah, what could have been. Here's another thing. What could have been. What could have been had Vince never bought Georgia Championship Wrestling or the time slot? What would have happened there? Would Georgia Championship Wrestling, or it was World Championship Wrestling, that's what it was called before Jimmy even took charge, would that promotion been the national promotion? I don't know. A lot of what ifs, huh?
It's interesting because, on the one hand, it's easy to take a look and say, well, things worked out the way they were supposed to. But in an alternate universe, I think we all know that sometimes it just pays to be first.
Yeah.
And if the NWA and Jim Crockett Promotions had an opportunity to really expand their national footprint in early 84 as opposed to early 85, they could have gotten the jump on Vince, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Not that they had the vision for the merch and all that.
Yeah. Vince had, I don't know. Jimmy just couldn't get out of the way of being a mom and pop's organization. And Vince had this vision about going national, and there's a lot to be said for also being in the New York market.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of the New York market, we know that whenever people talk about the WWF, they would refer to it as New York, at least inside the business. So let's take a look at Tony's number 3 on his top 5 moments in wrestling history. Probably no surprise, you hold WrestleMania 3 in very high regard.
Oh yeah, this took wrestling into the stadiums. and it laid the groundwork for what we're seeing at WrestleManias now, and what we're seeing for All In now, making wrestling a stadium show. And you can't get any bigger than Hulk Hogan against Andre the Giant. Take a look at that crowd shot. That's pro wrestling?
Yeah.
In 1983, for crying out loud. That's unbelievable. And there was early on them coming in just at the old Silver Dome, which is no longer around. Yeah, it was a monumental event. And
We're taking a look at this footage here, or the image here, of Randy Savage and Ricky Steamboat. And I think when people think about WrestleMania 3, by and large, they think of two matches. Of course, Hogan and Andre.
right.
But this one is the one that got everyone's attention in the business as far
Right.
as the guys in the ring. And Michael Hayes famously once said on WWE's Legends of the Roundtable show that after he watched that match with Savage and Steamboat, his immediate reaction was that the WWF was going to be tough to compete with now, because now they had great in-ring wrestling. He felt like maybe that was the knock on WWE, is it was too cartoon, it was too over the top, it was too Hollywood. But when those guys went out and tore it down, talking about Ricky Steamboat and Randy Savage, he felt differently. Do you remember thinking that? Like, whoa, they actually had a good match. That's not normally what they're about up there.
No, I never thought that. I never thought that good wrestling matches back then were the key to success in pro wrestling. I always thought it was promotion and being able to put on a good show. And there was no question in my mind that when I saw that crowd, and I think promoters around the nation saw the crowd that big, I think we all thought that, holy shit, we're not like that. We're way behind them. I mean, way behind them. And I think that was the feeling. And I don't think that a great match by Savage and Steamboat made me feel that way. It made me feel that, hey, it's a great wrestling match, good to see it. But what made me feel that we're way behind was just the size of the event and the venue.
Well, let's talk about number 2 on Tony Schiavone's top 5 moments in wrestling history list. Boy, this is a big one for you. Ric Flair leaving WCW for the WWF in 1991.
Yeah.
Of course, we know it all came to a big impasse with him and Jim Herd. And the next thing you know, the big gold belt is on Vince McMahon's desk. The unthinkable happened. Ric Flair left and he took the belt with him. How does that come in at number 2 for you?
Well, you can't. It goes back to what we were talking about TBS and how he was such a fixture on TBS, and the big gold belt was such a fixture on TBS. And all of a sudden, not only was Flair gone to the WWF, but the big gold belt was there as well. You can't. That is, I think it's a moment that. Well, I think it's the moment that ended Jim Herd's career. And it's, I don't know. It was just staggering to see that. I remember seeing it going, oh shit, we're dead in the water now. They've taken our biggest, it would be like Hulk Hogan coming here and bringing the winged eagle with him at that venture. At that juncture.
It's wild to think about Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair kind of being fumbled by the WWF.
Oh, I thought so.
I mean, you saw what WCW did with it when Eric Bischoff is able to land Hulk Hogan.
Yeah.
It's the first match they do, and it's the only time we really saw Ted Turner on camera.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted to be at the contract signing.
Right.
I mean, it felt like such a major moment.
Mm-hmm.
And you would think when it happened in the other direction, Vince would have been able to capitalize on it, but he didn't. Do you think that was, I mean, listen, the narrative out there is, oh, well, Flair wasn't a draw. The WWF fans didn't know.
That's not it.
You can fix all of that. I mean, my God, there's so many folks who were opponents for Hulk Hogan. Where was the draw for Earthquake before they established him in a feud with Hulk Hogan?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, you establish a guy.
Right.
But we saw this with the invasion angle. Is this just Vince's ego with the benefit of hindsight? That's the reason it doesn't happen?
Yes, of course. Vince did not want to put Hogan on the same level as Ric Flair, or Ric Flair on the same level as Hogan, I should say. It goes back to the hatred that Vince had for WCW. And I knew when Vince bought WCW, I knew that day it's not going to last. WCW is not going to become a viable product for Vince McMahon. He's going to just swallow it up, and he did.
Well, we all swallowed up number one as well. I'm not surprised to see number one on Tony Schiavone's top 5 biggest moments in wrestling history. Hulk Hogan turning heel in 1996. You said it best back then. Hulk Hogan, you can go straight to hell.
Yeah, buddy. Did we ever think we would see that? I mean, let's think about what Hogan meant to wrestling from the time he won the world title and Hulkamania began through the 80s. And even when he came into WCW and wrestled Flair in 94, do we really think he would turn heel? No, we never thought he would. He was the last person that would turn heel. And here he walks out in his Hulkster garb and turns heel. And it was unbelievable. It was absolutely unbelievable. And to make it even more unbelievable, the absolute great heel promo that he cut in the ring,
yes,
was phenomenal. Just great. It was just a great moment. It was and it turned WCW's fortunes around. Hogan did anyway, coming aboard. Let's not look past that. Hogan did. WCW was floundering. Hogan comes aboard and it starts to amp up. But when he turns heel, the Monday Night Wars were on because of him. And of course, Hall and Nash too. No doubt.
Why do you think the Hogan turn worked as well as it did? I ask, and I know you don't keep up with what's going on these days, but earlier this year, John Cena turned heel.
Mm-hmm.
And for at least a dozen years, fans have been clamoring for him to turn heel. They wanted it. And they wanted it until they got it, and then they didn't like it. Now, there's a lot of blame to go around and a lot of finger pointing about creatively and people not seeing through their original idea and things like that. We'll set all that aside for a minute. No matter what we thought about Hulk Hogan, boy, he committed to the bit and it worked.
Yes,
and it worked unbelievably well.
Right.
Do you think it's because maybe most of all people didn't expect it? Because I think with John Cena, I almost wonder how much of that, indifference and just, I don't want to say that people were angry with the turn, but they weren't happy with it. And I feel like a lot of the frustration may have been born out of unrealistic expectations. People may have expected, oh, well, this is going to be like Hulk Hogan. Man, there's only one NWO Hogan turn. It's at such an unrealistic expectation that if you're going to compare the John Cena turn to that, or really almost anything to that, everything pales in comparison. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And listen, social media was not back then what it is today.
That's right.
So it's hard to compare the two, but were people clamoring for Hulk Hogan to turn heel back in the day? I guess we'll never know because there wasn't Twitter or Instagram or all that shit. So maybe not, but I just think it's a different era. It's hard to compare them both.
Megan Nelson's with us here live, and she says the children of the 80s who loved Hulk Hogan were hitting puberty and didn't want to watch childish shit.
Wow. That's not a bad line, is it?
Well said. Well, we want to know from you, what are your top 5 moments in wrestling history? I got to say, I like most of Tony's list, but I can't say in a million years I would have guessed that Sasha Banks and Bayley were number 5. But again, I get your point. It's pushed women's wrestling forward.
Yeah, you've got to put it up there.
SaveWithConrad.com. My name's Daryl. Came from Massachusetts and I moved to Wisconsin. There's a lot of people that might be asking, why go with Conrad? Why go with Supreme Lending? And let me tell you something, brother. I think about the credentials, the tag team partner that I'd be working with. First of all, we got the podfather himself, Conrad. How can you go wrong with that? And then also go on to SaveWithEric.com, which, you know, who else could have kicked Vince's ass for 83 consecutive weeks? You can't beat that duo right there. But they did bring a secret weapon, and I didn't realize this because this was not advertised. I worked closely with Larry the Axe Thompson. And let me tell you, with all the stress with moving across the country with a large family that I have, it was reassuring to know that I had the enforcer at my back, handling questions from the other side of sellers, the other side with trying to find the right prices. He took care of all that. All I had to do was keep my eye on the prize and make it there to Wisconsin. They were absolutely fantastic. They checked in on me, especially Francis, very patient with me. I don't go through this process all the time, so I trusted the experts. I was able to call them. They called me if they had questions, and it felt like it was a personal arrangement. There was even a point in which, from the seller side, they wanted something else that wasn't part of the norm. Francis straight up told me, hey, we're loyal to you. We'll do whatever you want to do, and we'll make sure that you guys are taken care of. They came through. I made it to the dream. I'm the champion of my own destiny here. They were able to help pave the way for me and my family. I couldn't be more happy with the results. I went from having less than an acre to now 20 acres worth of land. They made that dream a reality. I'm Daryl, and I'm living in Friendship, Wisconsin, in my dream home, thanks to SaveWithConrad.com.
NMLS number 2129, Equal Housing Lender. SaveWithConrad.com.